For some of us, it's not a surprise that the ancient Egyptians had frizzy hair or even very coarse African hair. The type of hair that they had would require certain types of combs. Now, either coincidentally or effectively, these combs tended to be picks. The difference between a pick and a comb is very simple. A comb, which comes from the word come or KAMB, which means is German for teeth, means a comb with teeth, with a lot of teeth. This is different than a pick because a pick doesn't necessarily have to have more than one tooth. It can literally be one. Now, an afrocomb is a combination of these long sabers, so they're not teeth in the same way that a comb would be. So if we look at these Viking combs, we can see that they are mainly made and they're very thin in the way they're made because they're not for coarse hair. African hair can break these. Now, anyone who's ever had normal combs in their house who's got African textured hair, mine is extremely thick, knows that you can still comb your hair with most of these types of combs. It's just not going to be as pleasant with the other one. And of course, you probably shouldn't wait very long until you comb it again, which is why some people you'll find just combing all day in order to prevent pain. Others, like myself, sometimes would just not comb their hair or just shave it off. Now, of course, if you live in Africa, you have multiple options because you can comb your hair, you can braid your hair, you can cut your hair, you can do all kinds of stuff. And so these combs wouldn't be necessary in all cases. Africa, these type of combs are extremely rare. They're there because sometimes Africans used all kinds of things like palm oil to straighten their hair. This is a sort of combination of both a braid and a afro comb type thing at the bottom, but you can see that the results are very unique. This type of look is extremely rare. Even, in fact, only the Himba I've seen who have this type of hair. Outside of using mud, you could probably use some other thing, but the way that they do it, it does have a little bit of a unique, sophisticated look about it. Now, if we go back to the ancient Egyptians, as I said, most of their combs, starting from around 6000 BC, would be typically thought of as picks that are used for the hair. So afro combs of some kind. Their teeth, as you can see, which is very different than those in Europe, because a lot of those in Europe are meant to be thin so that they don't get caught in the hair. In they're almost a brush the way they use them. As you can see right here, no catching of the hair at all. Instead, it goes right through. And of course, the straighter your hair is, which is why they're pulling it, the easier it is to comb it. This is more to make it more straight than it is to comb it. And basically, in Africa, you don't make it straight by combing your hair, you basically make it uniform. Meanwhile, in Africa, when you see the way they comb their hair with these, obviously you can see that this one is a little more traditional. They've put a hippo there, so it's not the most practical, but this is not even rare for Africa. These are typical. In Upper Egypt, for example, there are hundreds of combs like this that have been found. So to differentiate, this is actually a pick. So picking your hair like this is actually something that can be done with one, and you can sort of get it uniform, but you can see the advantage of using multiple at a time. These types of picks are usually used to braid the hair, parts of the hair, and stuff like that, especially African hair, which is very difficult to work with. The types of braids that we find in Egypt would have been worked by things like this. Now, remember, this is not the same as the braids that you even get in the black community today, where they add extensions or whatever and then they braid that. These are coarse hair like this being pulled and forced into locks. African hair, even if put into these type of locks or put into these type of braids will refuse to stay there the minute that it's like water. If you open up a valve, if you open up a tap, it's coming out and it's going to look how it's supposed to. In this one, it looks fascinating because it's so, this is almost not natural the way the hair pops up, and at the top it's like thinner, so it has a completely unique look about it. Now, the reason why it is interesting that these people had a lot of these combs was because a lot of people from Africa took care of their hair a lot. Now, I have to mention that even though Africans straightened their hair after they met Europeans, they also did this prior to meeting Europeans, using all kinds of butters or whatever that were oils that were from fruits that could straighten the hair. And then, of course, using other mechanisms. I'm not even sure. Other hairstyles, of course, that would be seen in ancient Egypt are cornrows, are those smaller braids that you see, or those large braids that become smaller at the bottom. I compare those to the himba braids that you can see over there. Now, it's interesting that these combs that we see are so numerous, given the fact that a comb is not a ritual item for the most part. It's not a item that is used on occasion. It's actually something you use every single day. And so you should expect there to be no mistakes about it, no ambiguities, no, this could be that and that could be this, but a straight up yes or no answer on what type of combs they had. And the answer is they had picks. Now, some people would say it's because they had to deal with Nubian wigs, which is fine, but that still tells us that the type of hair that they were dealing with was African textured hair for the most part. Now, as I mentioned, African hair can be this short, and this type of hair when it's this short can use an afro comb, but then you can get even smaller hair where using an afro comb is pretty much pointless. You're going to need a brush, which is why in some very rare instances you can find a real comb in Africa. Well, not real, but a real comb, meaning it's not a pick. I know I'm showing women for some reason, but they are also men. Well, the majority of men used to also groom themselves in the past, especially when it came to hair. And so the people who were also in charge had people on standby to do their hair. You can imagine the kings and the pharaohs and the queens having people who probably wouldn't intermingle with anybody else doing their hair all day after pouring all kinds of oils in their hair and setting them up in a way where they would look regal to the average person. The densely thick hair that has been left over from the era of Egypt still tells us about the ancient times that these people lived. Now, it's not just that these people lived and had dense hair. Now, obviously, the red color, everybody is going to talk about, oh, are they brunette? No, this is black hair turned reddish because some of the color is fading due to oxidization and all kinds of things that happens naturally in the process. Here is some more African combs. You can see there's two versions. So the one at the top that you normally see, this with the larger teeth, that's typical of Afro combs. And the smaller side, that's more of the pulling of hair that is straight. Now, this is not just something that I noticed from the Nakada period, the most obvious period in ancient Egyptian history as the earliest periods that existed. The Afrocombs are everywhere. And not only are they everywhere, but they seem to have the same thickness as I'm talking about, and they seem to be used for that. Now, notice that they're not all the same size. So you have The one with the goat on it is extremely long and would be basically impractical outside of just shoving it in the hair of someone who has straight hair. It'd be basically impractical. Then you have the picts. You can see there's two sticks on the side. These would be still combs, but well, they're picks, not combs, because they don't have teeth. They have one saber. So they would be used to get rid of very tight knots or for braiding. The other one's teeth are gone, which has the bird on it, but you can see as well that it was the same pick type of comb. Then the other one, which looks like it has a snake, has these smaller picks at the bottom. This, as you can see on the symbols written on the side, is all Egyptian. But if you cut off the symbolism, they could be from any part of Africa, but they can't just be from any part of Europe or Asia or the Americas. This is not surprising, obviously, to most of us, but it will be surprising to certain people who have a certain thought about what ancient Egyptians look like. This is basically the same images, just in a different place. Of course, they're tied with animals. That's another thing that people don't realize. Ancient Egyptians used to groom animals as well. So you must be careful when you find these to make sure that they're for humans and they're not for, horses or whatever, which will give you a false positive if you think they're for like straight hair or something. In conclusion, yes, Afro combs were used all over Africa and they were used mainly for Afro textured hair. Some of them were never even used, they were just symbolic structures of the same type of combs. But basically, this is one of those proofs that are easy to find but hard to dismiss by the other side. So they never address it. And it's interesting that they don't because they have a lot of opportunity to just go look at it. You would think, since, they think the answers that come from the quote unquote Afrocentrists are so easy to debunk, that they would be like, okay, well, all we have to do is show that most of the combs in Egypt actually weren't picks, or all we have to do is show that their hair wasn't that type of texture. All we have to do is, show the debunk the things that are so easy, if they're that easy for real. Otherwise, we know what's really going on, which is they're very terribly difficult to debunk. And so you have to rely on very special cases. Now, of course, with the addition of metal, oh, yeah, I have to mention that part. Most of the ones made in Africa were made of ivory, a very plentiful substance, whereas a lot of those in Europe are made of bone. These are very two different substances in creation. This is also because ivory is not as common in that area. You do have walruses, which you can get ivory from, but you can understand why they would probably not go for that. And also, you can tell in those other countries why ivory is so valued. The fact that it's so rare, that is going to tell you. And think about how many things you can use ivory for. I mean, just a comb, there's a huge difference, and you can smooth it down as you like compared to a piece of bone. A piece of bone can get caught up. Now, we must remember that these people were not creating these types of combs to prove to anybody anything. They didn't do it so that they can prove, like, yo, we are different than the other people. This is just something they built on their own because it suited their type of hair. Thank you for watching.